They said marrying an alpha would save me. They lied. 3 weeks after I became Mrs. Damian Blackwood, his mother brought another woman into our bedroom and told me to smile while she took my place. Some of you watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. The moment you realize you were never the choice, just the placeholder. If you've ever been replaced in your own home, stick with me until the end of this story. You're going to want to see how this ends. And hey, drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to know my pack is out there. The first time Isabella Hayes understood what silence could do to a person, she was standing in the grand foyer of Blackwood Manor with her suitcase still unpacked and her wedding ring cutting into her swollen finger. Damien had carried her over the threshold exactly 19 days ago. Now he wouldn't even look at her. She stood at the bottom of the marble staircase, watching her husband's back disappear down the eastern corridor, his shoulders tight under his black jacket, his jaw set in that way that meant he'd already made a decision without her. The morning light coming through the cathedral windows made everything look holy and cold at the same time. Veronica Blackwood's heels clicked against stone somewhere above her. Isabella's stomach dropped. She'd learned to recognize that sound the way prey learns the footsteps of a hunter. Sharp, deliberate, coming closer. When Veronica appeared at the top of the stairs, she wasn't alone. The woman beside her was younger than Isabella by maybe 2 years, with the kind of face that belonged on the cover of magazines about women who destroy homes without trying. Dark hair pulled back smooth, skin like she'd never spent a day doubting herself, and those eyes, pale green and utterly certain of their right to be there. Veronica descended slowly, one hand on the railing, the other resting on the woman's arm like they were old friends. Like this was normal. Isabella felt her lungs shrink. "Mrs. Blackwood," Veronica said, her voice carrying that practiced warmth that never reached her eyes. "I'd like you to meet Serena Vale. She'll be staying with us for a while." The world tilted slightly to the left. Isabella's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked from Veronica to Serena and back again, searching for the punchline, the explanation, the anything that would make this make sense. "Staying?" Isabella finally managed. "Here?" Veronica smiled the way people smile when they're about to ruin your life and call it a favor. "Yes, darling, here, with the family." The word family landed like a slap. Serena stepped forward and extended her hand. "It's really nice to meet you, Isabella. I've heard so much about you." Her voice was honey, smooth and sweet and suffocating. Isabella stared at the outstretched hand like it was a weapon. She didn't take it. "I'm sorry," Isabella said slowly, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "I don't understand what's happening right now." Veronica's smile tightened just a fraction. "Let's talk in the sitting room, shall we? This is a family matter." Isabella wanted to scream that she was family, that she'd signed the papers and taken the vows and given up everything to be here. But something in Veronica's tone made it clear. She wasn't family. She was a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. They moved into the sitting room, a sprawling space filled with leather furniture and bookshelves that smelled like old money and older grudges. Serena sat down on the couch like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Veronica poured herself tea from the silver service on the side table. Nobody offered Isabella anything. She stood near the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, nails digging into her own skin just to feel something other than the panic rising in her throat. Veronica finally turned to face her, teacup balanced perfectly in her hand. "Isabella, you know how important bloodlines are to this pack, how important legacy is." Isabella's pulse hammered in her ears. Veronica continued, her tone patient like she was explaining algebra to a child. "Damien is the heir to one of the most powerful alpha lines in the region. His children will lead this pack for generations. We can't afford to leave that to chance." "Chance," Isabella repeated flatly. Serena shifted on the couch, crossing her legs. She still hadn't stopped smiling. Veronica set her teacup down with a soft clink. "You've been here nearly a month, Isabella, and while I'm sure you're doing your best, the truth is we need to ensure the strength of the bloodline. Serena comes from a superior lineage. Her family has produced alphas for 7 generations without interruption. She's exactly what this family needs." The words hung in the air like smoke. Isabella felt something crack open inside her chest. "Wait, are you saying—" Veronica's eyes were ice. "I'm saying Serena will be joining Damien as his second mate, for the good of the pack, for the future of this family." The room spun. Isabella's knees went weak, but she locked them, refusing to collapse in front of these women. second mate. The words didn't even sound real. In the old laws, it was allowed, technically, under extreme circumstances, but it was archaic, brutal, reserved for times of war or extinction-level crises. This wasn't that. This was cruelty dressed up as tradition. Does Damien know about this? Isabella's voice came out hoarse. Veronica tilted her head. Of course he knows, darling. Where do you think I got the idea? The lie was so smooth, Isabella almost believed it. But she'd seen Damien's face that morning, the guilt, the avoidance. He knew something was coming, he just didn't have the spine to tell her himself. Serena finally spoke again, her voice soft and sympathetic in a way that made Isabella want to throw something. I know this is hard for you, Isabella, but I'm not here to replace you. I'm here to help. We can share the responsibilities. It doesn't have to be a competition. Isabella laughed. It came out sharp and broken. Share. Veronica's expression hardened. You'll adjust. Women have done this for centuries. It's not personal, Isabella. It's practical. It's humiliating, Isabella shot back. Her voice was louder now, cracking at the edges. You brought another woman into my home, into my marriage, and you're telling me it's not personal? Veronica stood, smoothing her skirt. Your home? This house has been in the Blackwood family for 140 years. You've been here for 3 weeks. Don't mistake a title for ownership. The words were a knife between the ribs. Isabella felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Where's Damien? Isabella demanded. Veronica waved a hand dismissively. He's handling pack business. He'll speak with you when he's ready. When he's ready, Isabella repeated bitterly. Serena stood then, smoothing her dress, and walked toward the door. She paused beside Isabella, close enough that Isabella could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral and wrong. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I really do hope we can be friends. Isabella turned to look at her, and for the first time since the conversation started, she let the fury show on her face. Get away from me, Serena blinked, startled. Then her smile returned, softer this time, pitying. She left the room without another word. Veronica lingered, watching Isabella with something that might have been satisfaction. You'll come around, she said. You always do. Then she was gone too, leaving Isabella alone in the sitting room with the taste of bile in her mouth and the sound of her own heartbeat drowning out everything else. What? She didn't see Damien until that night. He came into their bedroom long after dark, his shirt untucked and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it all day. Isabella was sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, staring at the wall. She didn't look at him when he walked in. Bella, he started. Don't, she said. He stopped in the middle of the room, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. I know you're upset. Upset. The word was so insufficient it almost made her laugh again. She turned to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him take a step back. Your mother brought another woman into our house, Isabella said slowly, her voice shaking with the effort of staying calm. Into our marriage. And you knew. You knew, and you didn't tell me. Damien ran a hand over his face. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Damien? Because it looks like your mother is trying to replace me with someone she deems more worthy, and it looks like you're letting her. It's about the bloodline, he said, and even he didn't sound convinced. The pack elders have been pressuring my mother for months. They're worried that I'm not good enough, Isabella finished. That's what you mean, right? That I'm not strong enough or pure enough or whatever the hell qualifies someone to be part of your precious bloodline. Damien's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair? Isabella stood, her hands balled into fists. You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything for you. My pack, my family, my entire life. I came here because you told me we were building something together. And now you're telling me I have to share you with some stranger because your mother decided I'm not adequate? He looked away. That silence, that damning, cowardly silence, was all the answer she needed. Say something, Isabella whispered. Defend me. Tell me you're going to stand up to her. Tell me I matter more than some sick, twisted tradition. Damien's throat worked like he was trying to swallow glass. I can't. The words hit her like a physical blow. You can't, she repeated numbly. He finally met her eyes, and she saw it there, the resignation, the defeat. He'd already surrendered, not to his mother, to himself, to the version of himself that would always choose the easier path. I'm the heir, Isabella. I have responsibilities that go beyond what I want, beyond what you want.
If the pack elders believe Serena strengthens our position, then let them marry her, Isabella snapped. You want a broodmare for your bloodline? Fine. But don't ask me to stand there and smile while you parade her around like I'm supposed to be grateful for the humiliation. Damien flinched. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Tell me, Damien. Make it make sense.
He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I thought maybe you'd understand, that you'd see it's not about you, it's about the pack. Isabella laughed, and it was the saddest sound she'd ever made. It's always about the pack with you people. But I'm part of the pack too, aren't I? Or was that just another lie? Damien didn't answer. She grabbed her jacket from the chair by the window and headed for the door. Where are you going? He asked. Anywhere that's not here, she said without looking back. She walked out into the cold night air and kept walking until her legs ached and her lungs burned and the lights of Blackwood Manor were just a faint glow behind her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked. And somewhere deep in the hollow space where her heart used to be, something sharp and dark began to grow. The next morning, Isabella woke up in one of the guest rooms on the opposite side of the manor. She'd locked the door behind her and slept in her clothes, too exhausted to care about anything except the silence. When she finally dragged herself downstairs, the house was full of people. Pack members she barely recognized milled around the main hall, chatting in clusters, their voices low and conspiratorial. She caught fragments of conversation as she passed. Heard Veronica finally brought in the Veil girl. About time, honestly. Poor Isabella, but what did she expect? She kept her head down and made her way toward the kitchen, hoping to grab coffee and disappear before anyone tried to talk to her. No such luck. Serena was sitting at the breakfast table, a plate of fruit in front of her, laughing at something one of the younger pack members had said. She looked radiant, comfortable, like she'd been part of this family for years instead of hours. Isabella froze in the doorway. Serena looked up and smiled. Oh, Isabella, good morning. Come sit with us. The younger wolves turned to look at her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to barely concealed amusement. Isabella's stomach twisted. I'm fine, she said stiffly. Just grabbing coffee. Serena stood, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. Don't be silly. You should eat something. You look exhausted. The concern in her voice was so perfectly calibrated it made Isabella's skin crawl. She forced herself to walk to the counter, poured a cup of coffee with shaking hands, and turned to leave. One of the younger wolves, a girl named Cassidy who'd never spoken to Isabella before, called out, So is it true? Are you and Serena both Lunas now? The room went silent. Isabella gripped her mug so hard she thought it might shatter. She looked at Serena, who had the audacity to look uncomfortable, like she hadn't orchestrated this entire nightmare. I don't know, Isabella said coldly. Why don't you ask Mrs. Blackwood? She seems to be making all the decisions around here. She walked out before anyone could respond. The days blurred together after that. Serena moved into the east wing, into a suite of rooms just down the hall from the master bedroom. Veronica threw a small reception to introduce her to the pack elders, and Isabella was expected to attend. She stood in the corner of the banquet hall in a dress Veronica had picked out, smiling when spoken to, nodding when appropriate, dying inside. Damien barely looked at her. He stood beside Serena most of the night, playing the role of gracious alpha heir, laughing at jokes Isabella couldn't hear, his hand occasionally brushing Serena's arm in a way that made Isabella want to set the entire room on fire. At one point, Veronica approached her with a glass of champagne and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're doing wonderfully, darling. See? It's not so bad. Isabella didn't trust herself to speak. Veronica leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Just remember, this family has survived for generations because we know how to adapt. You'd be wise to do the same. Then she was gone, gliding across the room to greet another elder, leaving Isabella standing there with champagne she didn't want and rage she couldn't express. Tasik. It was 3 days later when Isabella found the documents. She'd gone into Veronica's study looking for a pen, stupid, reckless, but she was past caring about boundaries, and stumbled across a folder tucked into the bottom drawer of the mahogany desk. Inside were letters, contracts, medical reports. Her hands trembled as she read. The letters were between Veronica and Serena's family, dated 6 months before Isabella's wedding. They discussed terms, bloodline compatibility, financial arrangements. There were clauses about inheritance, about pack alliances, about securing the Blackwood legacy through Serena's superior genetics. One letter, written in Veronica's sharp handwriting, made Isabella's blood run cold. Isabella Hayes is a temporary solution at best. Damien's infatuation will fade. We'll position Serena as the natural successor once the girl realizes she's out of her depth. Temporary solution. The words echoed in her skull. She kept reading. The medical reports were worse. Fake documents claiming Isabella had a hereditary condition that made conception unlikely. Forged physician signatures. Fabricated test results. All designed to paint her as damaged, unfit, a liability to the bloodline. None of it was true. But it didn't matter. Veronica had shown these reports to the pack elders. She'd used them to justify bringing Serena in. She'd weaponized Isabella's own body against her with lies so carefully crafted they'd be impossible to disprove without a full investigation, one Isabella would never be granted. She stood there in that study, surrounded by the evidence of her own destruction, and felt something inside her finally break free. Not hope, not love, fury, pure, cold, unrelenting. She carefully photographed every document with her phone, replaced the folder exactly as she'd found it, and walked out of that room a different person than the one who'd entered. That night, Isabella didn't go to dinner. She stayed in her room, door locked, scrolling through the photos on her phone, memorizing every detail. She thought about confronting Veronica, thought about screaming at Damien, thought about burning the entire manor down with everyone inside. But she didn't, because rage without strategy was just noise, and Isabella was done making noise. She opened her laptop and started researching. Pack laws, elder council protocols, financial audits, anything that could give her leverage, anything that could help her fight back. She worked through the night, her eyes burning, her fingers cramping, her mind sharper than it had been in weeks. By the time the sun rose, she had a plan. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was hers. Us. The winter moon ceremony was 6 weeks away. Isabella had that long to gather enough evidence to bury Veronica Blackwood and expose the rot at the heart of this family. 6 weeks to decide whether she wanted revenge or freedom. 6 weeks to figure out if she could save herself before this place destroyed what was left of her. She stared at her reflection in the mirror as dawn light crept across the walls. The woman looking back at her was tired, bruised, but not broken. Not yet. And somewhere deep in the part of her that had learned to survive long before she ever met Damien Blackwood, she felt a smile pull at the corner of her mouth. Let them think she was beaten. Let Veronica believe she'd won. Isabella would smile. She'd play the part. She'd be the quiet, obedient Luna they expected. Right up until the moment she wasn't. She closed her laptop, climbed into bed, and for the first time in weeks she slept without nightmares. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy, with the promise of something coming. Something Veronica Blackwood wasn't ready for. Isabella learned to move through Blackwood Manor like a ghost. She woke before dawn, dressed in clothes that made her invisible, and slipped through hallways while the rest of the house still slept. She attended meals when required, smiled when spoken to, and disappeared before anyone could ask her to stay. She became so quiet, so unremarkable, that people stopped noticing when she entered a room. It was exactly what she needed. While Serena held court in the sunlit parlors, laughing with pack members and charming the elders, Isabella haunted the shadows. She listened at doorways, she memorized schedules. She learned which servants were loyal to Veronica and which ones resented her. She studied the architecture of this family's power structure the way a prisoner studies the walls of her cell, looking for cracks. And she found them. Veronica's personal assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, left her office unlocked every Tuesday afternoon for exactly 20 minutes while she took tea in the conservatory. The pack accountant, a nervous man named Richard, kept his files in a cabinet secured with a lock so old Isabella picked it with a hairpin on her third try. And Damien, predictable as always, stored his passwords on a slip of paper tucked inside his desk drawer because he could never remember them. Piece by piece, Isabella built her case. She discovered that Veronica had been siphoning pack funds for years, moving money through shell companies with names that sounded legitimate but dissolved under scrutiny. She found contracts with rival packs that violated territorial agreements the elders had spent decades negotiating. She uncovered emails between Veronica and Serena's family that made it clear this arrangement had been orchestrated long before Damien ever proposed. But the worst discovery came on a Thursday morning when Isabella was alone in Veronica's study. She'd gone in looking for more financial records and found a leather journal tucked behind a row of law books. The handwriting inside was Veronica's, elegant and damning. Damien is weak. He always has been. Isabella was supposed to be controllable, grateful enough to stay quiet, fragile enough to break when necessary. But the girl has more spine than I anticipated. No matter. Serena will eclipse her within the month. Once Isabella realizes she's lost, she'll leave on her own. They always do. Isabella's hand shook as she read. If she proves stubborn, we'll manufacture a scandal. A public humiliation should suffice. The pack will turn on her. Damien will have no choice but to support the dissolution. I've already spoken to several elders about her alleged instability. They're sympathetic. Alleged instability. The phrase made Isabella's vision blur. She photographed every page, her breath coming in short gasps, her heart slamming against her ribs. When she finished, she replaced the journal exactly as she'd found it and walked out of that study with her fingernails cutting crescents into her palms. She made it to the bathroom before she vomited. Afterward, she sat on the cold tile floor, forehead pressed against the porcelain, and let herself feel it. The betrayal. The rage. The bone-deep exhaustion of fighting a battle she'd been set up to lose from the beginning. Then she stood up, rinsed her mouth, and went back to work. Because feeling it was one thing, letting it stop her was another. That night, Isabella did something reckless. She went to Damien. She found him in his office, hunched over paperwork, looking older than his 29 years. He glanced up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face before settling into guarded neutrality. "We need to talk," Isabella said. He set down his pen. "Okay." She closed the door behind her and sat in the chair across from his desk, her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. She'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head, trying to find the words that would crack through his armor. She'd decided there weren't any. "Your mother is stealing from the pack," Isabella said flatly. "She's been doing it for years. I have proof." Damien blinked. "What?" Isabella pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos. Shell companies, falsified reports, transactions that don't add up. She's moving money offshore. "Millions, Damien. Maybe more." He stared at the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something darker. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Isabella asked. "Look at the evidence. Look at what she's doing." Damien's jaw tightened. "You went through her files." "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. "Jesus, Bella, do you have any idea how much trouble you could be in if she finds out?" Isabella laughed, sharp and bitter. "I'm already in trouble, Damien. Or did you forget the part where your mother brought another woman into our marriage and is actively trying to destroy my reputation? That's different. How? How is it different?" He didn't answer. Isabella leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "She's been planning this from the beginning. Before we got married. Before you even proposed. Serena isn't here because of bloodlines or pack politics. She's here because your mother wanted someone she could control. And you let her do it." "I didn't let her." "You didn't stop her," Isabella snapped. "That's the same thing." Damien stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the expectations. Every decision I make affects hundreds of people. I can't just—" "Then make a decision that affects me," Isabella interrupted. "For once, choose me over her." The silence stretched out between them, thick and suffocating. Damien stared out at the grounds, his shoulders tense, his reflection ghostly in the darkened glass. "I don't know if I can." The words hung there, heavy and final. Isabella felt something inside her chest go cold. "Then we're done." "Bella—" "No," she said, standing. "I'm done begging you to be the man I thought you were. I'm done waiting for you to grow a spine. I came here to give you a chance to do the right thing, to stand with me against her. But you can't. You won't. So we're done." She turned toward the door. "What are you going to do?" Damien asked quietly. Isabella paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Whatever I have to." She walked out without looking back. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in survival. Isabella stopped sleeping in the guest room and moved into one of the cottages on the far edge of the property, a small stone building used for visiting relatives. It was drafty and isolated, but it was hers. No one bothered her there. No one even seemed to notice she'd left. She spent her days gathering more evidence, building alliances with the few pack members who weren't under Veronica's thumb, and planning for the winter moon ceremony. The ceremony was everything in pack politics. The one night when grievances could be aired publicly, when challenges could be made, when the power structure could shift. It was also the night Veronica planned to have Isabella formally step down as Luna. Margaret, Veronica's assistant, had accidentally confirmed it during a conversation Isabella overheard in the kitchen. The old woman had been complaining to one of the cooks about the extra work involved in preparing two separate announcements for the ceremony, one naming Serena as primary Luna, the other thanking Isabella for her service and releasing her from her duties. Releasing her, like she was an employee being let go. Isabella recorded the conversation on her phone and added it to the growing file she'd compiled. She had enough evidence now to bury Veronica. Financial crimes, illegal alliances, forged documents, conspiracy. All of it meticulously documented and backed up in 3 separate locations. But evidence was only useful if people were willing to see it. And that meant she needed allies. Heck. The first person Isabella approached was Elder Harlow. He was the oldest member of the council, a man who'd served under Damien's grandfather and had a reputation for valuing tradition and honor above politics. He was also one of the few elders who'd never seemed particularly charmed by Serena. Isabella found him in the packed library on a gray afternoon reading near the fireplace. "Elder Harlow," she said quietly. "May I speak with you?" He looked up, his weathered face creasing into a frown. "Mrs. Blackwood." Of course. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "I need your help." His frown deepened. "With what?" Isabella pulled out her phone and handed it to him. "I've discovered some irregularities in the PAC's finances, and in the process that brought Serena Vale here. I think you should see them." He took the phone, his fingers clumsy on the screen. As he scrolled through the evidence, his expression shifted from skepticism to shock to cold fury. When he finally looked up, his voice was granite. "Where did you get this?" "I've been documenting it for weeks," Isabella said. "All of it is verifiable. Bank statements, emails, contracts. I can provide hard copies if needed." Elder Harlow set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "Does Damien know?" "I told him," Isabella said. He didn't want to believe it. The old man's jaw worked. "And Veronica?" "Doesn't know I have this." "Not yet." He stood, pacing to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "This is a serious accusation, Mrs. Blackwood. If you bring this forward and can't prove it—" "I can prove it," Isabella interrupted. "That's why I'm coming to you first. I need someone on the council I can trust. Someone who cares more about the PAC than about protecting Veronica's reputation." Elder Harlow turned to face her, his eyes sharp. "Why now? Why not bring this forward weeks ago?" "Because I needed to be sure," Isabella said, "and because I needed to understand what I was up against." He studied her for a long moment. "And what are you up against?" Isabella met his gaze without flinching. A woman who's been stealing from this PAC for years and using her position to manipulate everyone around her, including her son. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Elder Harlow nodded. "I'll need to review everything, all of it. If what you're saying is true, this goes before the full council." Isabella exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said grimly. "If Veronica finds out you're behind this before the ceremony, she'll bury you. You understand that?" "Yes, and you're willing to take that risk?" Isabella thought about the journal entry, the fake medical reports, the calculated cruelty of everything Veronica had done. "Yes," she said, "I am." The next person Isabella needed was harder to approach. Serena. She found her in the garden 3 days before the ceremony, cutting roses in the late afternoon light. She looked like something out of a painting, graceful and serene and utterly untouchable. Isabella's stomach twisted. "Serena!" she called. The other woman turned, surprise flashing across her face, before settling into that careful, practiced warmth. "Isabella." "Hi. I didn't expect to see you out here. Can we talk?" Isabella asked. Serena hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." They walked to a bench near the fountain, far enough from the house that they wouldn't be overheard. Isabella sat down, her hands clenched in her lap. Serena remained standing, her expression guarded. "I'm going to ask you something," Isabella said quietly, "and I need you to tell me the truth." Serena's smile faltered. "Okay." "Did you know," Isabella asked, "before you came here, did you know Veronica had been planning this for months? That she was going to use you to push me out?" Serena's face went pale. That was answer enough.
Isabella laughed, bitter and hollow. Of course you knew. It's not like that, Serena said quickly. I didn't. I mean, my family made the arrangements, but I thought. You thought what? Isabella demanded. That I'd just accept it? That I'd smile and play along while you took everything from me?
I never wanted to hurt you, Serena said, and for the first time she sounded genuine. I was just doing what my family told me to do, what Veronica told me to do. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Isabella said coldly. Serena sank onto the bench beside her, her shoulders slumping. You don't understand. My family, they've been trying to secure an alliance with the Blackwoods for years. When Veronica approached us, they saw it as an opportunity. I couldn't say no, so you said yes to destroying my life instead. Serena flinched. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Isabella turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Serena was afraid, not of Isabella, of Veronica, of her own family, of the trap she'd walked into the same way Isabella had. Does he love you? Isabella asked suddenly. Serena blinked. What? Damien? Does he love you? Serena looked away. No, I don't think he loves anyone right now, least of all himself. Isabella felt a bitter satisfaction at that. Good. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the fountain filling the space between them. Finally, Serena spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you going to do? Isabella stood. I'm going to tell the truth, at the ceremony, in front of everyone. Serena's eyes widened. Isabella, if you do that, Veronica will destroy you. She'll turn the entire pack against you. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything, Isabella said. The only thing left is my dignity, and I'm taking that back. She started to walk away, then paused. If you're smart, you'll leave before the ceremony, because when this comes out, your family's alliance with Veronica won't be worth anything, and you'll be just as disposable as I was. Serena stared at her, her face stricken. Isabella didn't wait for a response. She walked back toward the house, her pulse hammering, her mind already moving to the next piece of the plan. Bus. The night before the winter moon ceremony, Isabella couldn't sleep. She lay in the cottage, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome. She'd given Elder Harlow copies of everything. She'd prepared her statement. She'd even written a letter to Damien, though she doubted he'd read it. But doubt still gnawed at her. What if the council didn't believe her? What if Veronica had more power than Isabella realized? What if this entire plan blew up in her face and she ended up with nothing? She sat up, pulling on a sweater, and walked outside. The air was cold and sharp, the sky clear and full of stars. She walked to the edge of the property where the forest began, far enough that the lights of the manor were just a faint glow behind her. She thought about running, just getting in her car and driving until she hit the border of pack territory and kept going. Starting over somewhere, Veronica Blackwood was just a name and Damien was just a mistake, and none of this mattered anymore. But she couldn't. Not because she was brave, not because she was noble, because something inside her refused to let Veronica win. She'd been pushed down her entire life. By her old pack, by her family, by every person who'd ever looked at her and decided she wasn't enough. And she'd learned to survive it by making herself smaller, quieter, less. But she was done with that. Tomorrow she would stand in front of the entire pack and make herself as loud as possible. She would burn every bridge, destroy every illusion, and force them all to see what Veronica Blackwood really was. And if it broke her in the process, at least she'd break on her own terms. She stood there in the cold until her fingers went numb, then walked back to the cottage and finally slept. The morning of the ceremony dawned cold and bright. Isabella dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. In a way she was, the death of whatever naive hope she'd carried into this family. She arrived at the manor early, slipping into the ballroom where the ceremony would be held. Workers were still setting up chairs and decorations, hanging banners with the Blackwood crest, arranging the raised platform where the council would sit. She walked to the front of the room and stood where she'd be standing tonight, looking out at the empty chairs. Her hands were shaking. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Elder Harlow approaching, his expression grave. Are you ready? He asked. No, Isabella admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. He nodded. The council has reviewed your evidence. We'll give you the floor during the Luna address. Veronica doesn't know. She thinks tonight is going to go exactly as she planned. Isabella's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me, he said quietly. What you're about to do will change everything, for better or worse. You understand that?
Yes. He studied her for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. You're braver than anyone gave you credit for. Or stupider, Isabella said with a weak smile. Perhaps both, he agreed, and walked away.
The ceremony began at dusk. The ballroom filled with pack members dressed in formal attire, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Isabella stood near the back, watching them file in, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She saw Serena enter, beautiful in a silver gown, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the room. Serena looked away first. Damien arrived with Veronica on his arm, both of them regal and untouchable. Veronica's smile was victorious. She thought she'd already won. Isabella felt a cold satisfaction at that. The council took their places on the platform. Elder Harlow caught Isabella's eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time. Veronica stepped forward, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room. Welcome, members of the Blackwood Pack. Tonight we gather to honor our traditions and celebrate the strength of our bloodline. Isabella's pulse roared in her ears. Veronica continued, her tone warm and gracious. Tonight we also recognize a transition in leadership. As you know, my son Damien has taken a second mate to ensure the continued strength of our line. Serena Vale has proven herself a worthy addition to our family, and tonight we formally acknowledge her as primary Luna. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Veronica gestured to Isabella, who stood frozen near the back. And we thank Isabella Hayes for her service to this family. Though her time as Luna has been brief, we are grateful for her contributions. The words were knives wrapped in silk. Isabella's vision narrowed. This was it. The moment Veronica expected her to step forward, bow her head, and accept her dismissal like a good little soldier. Instead, Isabella walked to the front of the room, her chin high, her hands steady. Elder Harlow stood. Mrs. Blackwood has requested to address the council. Veronica's smile faltered. That's not part of the proceedings. She has the right, Elder Harlow said firmly. Veronica's eyes flashed with fury, but she stepped aside. Isabella took the center of the platform, looking out at hundreds of faces staring back at her. She saw Damien in the front row, his expression unreadable. She saw Serena near the side, her hands clasped tight. She saw Veronica, and the look in the woman's eyes promised violence. Isabella took a breath and began to speak. I came to this family believing I was building a life, believing I was wanted, believing the promises that were made to me. Her voice rang clear and steady. I was wrong. The room went silent. Veronica Blackwood brought me here not because she valued me, but because she needed someone she could control. Someone who would stay quiet while she secured her own power. And when I didn't break the way she expected, she brought in someone else. She looked directly at Veronica. But that's not the worst of it, because while she was orchestrating my humiliation, she was also stealing from this pack, for years. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Isabella pulled out a folder and held it up. I have proof. Bank statements showing millions in pack funds funneled into offshore accounts. Contracts with rival territories that violate our agreements. Forged medical documents used to justify decisions that benefited only her. Veronica's face had gone white. And I have emails, Isabella continued, her voice rising, proving that Serena Vale's arrival was planned months before my wedding, that this entire situation was designed to replace me with someone Veronica could manipulate. She turned to the council. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for justice, for accountability, for this pack to see what's been happening right under their noses. She threw the folder onto the council table. The ballroom erupted, voices shouting, council members demanding order. Veronica's face twisting with rage as she lunged forward. You lying little... Elder Harlow's voice cut through the chaos. Silence! The room fell quiet. He picked up the folder, his expression grim. The council will review this evidence immediately. Until then, this ceremony is suspended. Veronica turned on Isabella, her voice low and venomous. You have no idea what you've just done. Isabella met her gaze without flinching. Yes, I do. And for the first time since she'd entered this family, she felt free. Then Serena's voice rang out from the side of the room, high and panicked. Stop! All of you! Just stop! Every head turned. Serena stood near the doorway, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking. You want the truth? Fine. Here it is. She pointed at Veronica. She promised my family power, wealth, status. She said if I played along, if I smiled and charmed everyone, I'd be set for life. But she never cared about me either. I was just another pawn. Her voice broke. And I went along with it because I was too afraid to say no. But I can't do this anymore. I can't stand here and pretend this is okay. She looked at Isabella. You were right. I should have left. I should have told the truth from the beginning. Then she turned to Damien. And you let your mother destroy her. You watched it happen and did nothing. You're just as guilty as she is. The room exploded again, and Isabella, standing at the center of it all, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was the point of no return. The ballroom felt like it was collapsing inward. Isabella stood at the center of the platform, watching the chaos unfold around her like a wildfire she'd started but couldn't control. Pack members were shouting, some demanding answers, others defending Veronica. The council members huddled together, passing the folder of evidence between them with expressions ranging from shock to fury. And Serena stood frozen near the doorway, her confession still hanging in the air like smoke after an explosion. Veronica's face had gone from white to crimson, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She took a step towards Serena, her voice sharp enough to cut stone. You stupid, ungrateful little... Enough, Elder Harlow's voice boomed. He stood, his hands raised, his weathered face carved from granite. This ceremony is over. The council will convene immediately to review the evidence presented. Veronica Blackwood, you will answer for these allegations. Veronica turned on him, her eyes blazing. You have no authority to... I have every authority, Harlow interrupted, as do the other elders. And if even half of what Mrs. Blackwood has presented is true, you've committed crimes against this pack that carry severe consequences. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Isabella felt her knees go weak with relief. It was working. They were listening. For the first time since she'd entered this family, someone was actually hearing her. Then Damien stood. The room fell silent. He looked at Isabella, and the expression on his face was something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not betrayal. Something colder, more final. Is this what you wanted? He asked quietly. To destroy my family in front of everyone? Isabella's breath caught. Your family destroyed me first. By telling the truth? Damien's voice was rising now, his composure cracking. By airing our private business to the entire pack? By humiliating my mother? Your mother humiliated me every single day I was here, Isabella shot back. She brought another woman into our marriage. She forged medical documents to make me look defective. She stole from this pack for years. And you're angry at me for exposing it? Damien's jaw tightened. You had no right. I had every right, Isabella said, her voice shaking. I'm part of this pack too. Or I was until your mother decided I wasn't good enough. She looked around the room at all the faces staring back at her, some sympathetic, some hostile, most just confused. I came here believing in something, Isabella continued, believing this family stood for honor and strength, but all I found was corruption and cruelty, and I'm done pretending it's okay. She turned back to the council. I've given you everything you need to hold Veronica accountable. What you do with it is up to you. Then she walked off the platform, her legs trembling, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might stop. She made it 3 steps before Veronica's voice cut through the noise. You think you've won? Isabella stopped. Veronica moved toward her slowly, deliberately, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted around her like water. When she reached Isabella, she leaned in close enough that only Isabella could hear. You have no idea what you've just started, Veronica whispered. You think exposing me will save you? It won't. Because when this is over, when the dust settles, you'll still be the outsider who tried to tear down a dynasty, and this pack will never forgive you for it. Isabella met her gaze without flinching. Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Veronica smiled, cold and sharp. We'll see how long that lasts. Then she turned and walked toward the council, her head high, her expression serene, like she was attending a garden party instead of facing allegations that could destroy her. Isabella watched her go and felt ice settle in her chest. This wasn't over. The council convened in a private chamber behind the ballroom, leaving the pack members to whisper and speculate in the main hall. Isabella wasn't allowed inside. Neither was Damien. They stood on opposite sides of the corridor, not looking at each other, the silence between them heavy enough to crush bone. Serena had disappeared somewhere, probably hiding. Isabella couldn't blame her. After what felt like hours, Elder Harlow emerged, his expression grim. The council has reviewed the evidence, he announced. We will reconvene tomorrow evening to deliver our verdict. Until then, Veronica Blackwood is suspended from all PAC duties pending investigation. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Isabella felt a flicker of hope. Suspended. It wasn't exile, but it was something. Then Harlow turned to her. Mrs. Blackwood, you're also required to appear before the council tomorrow. There are questions about how you obtained some of this information. Isabella's stomach dropped. What? Breaking into private offices and accessing confidential files without authorization is a serious matter, Harlow said carefully. Even if the information revealed wrongdoing, I was trying to protect myself, Isabella protested. She was destroying my reputation with fake medical records. What was I supposed to do? That's what the council will determine, Harlow said. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. He walked away before she could respond. Isabella stood there, feeling the floor tilt beneath her feet. She'd thought exposing Veronica would be the end of it, the climax, the moment everything fell into place. But she'd been naive. Because in families like this, power didn't surrender easily. It adapted. It found new angles of attack. It turned your weapons against you. She looked across the corridor at Damien. He was watching her now, his expression unreadable. Did you know? She asked quietly. That they'd go after me too? He didn't answer. That silence told her everything. Isabella didn't go back to the cottage that night. She left the manor entirely, driving into town to a small motel on the edge of PAC territory. She paid cash for a room with peeling wallpaper and a view of the parking lot, locked the door behind her, and finally let herself fall apart. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, her chest heaving with sobs she'd been holding back for hours. She'd done everything right. She'd gathered evidence, she'd found allies, she'd stood up and told the truth. And somehow she was still losing. Because this was never about right or wrong. It was about power, about who had it and who didn't. And Isabella had been fooling herself thinking that truth was enough to level the playing field. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen, and then she lay down on the scratchy comforter and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't check it, but something made her pick it up. It was a message from an unknown number. You need to leave, tonight. They're coming for you. Isabella's blood went cold. She sat up, her pulse racing. Who is this? The response came immediately. Someone who knows what Veronica is capable of. She's not going to let you testify tomorrow. Get out while you still can. Isabella's hands trembled. Is this Serena? No response. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. It could be a trap. It could be Veronica's way of making her look guilty, like she was fleeing because she'd lied. But it could also be real. She thought about the look in Veronica's eyes earlier, the cold certainty, the promise of consequences. Isabella grabbed her bag and started throwing her few belongings into it. She didn't know where she'd go, didn't know if running would make things better or worse, but staying felt like suicide. She was halfway to the door when it burst open. 3 men stood in the hallway, PAC enforcers. She recognized 2 of them, Marcus and Cole, both loyal to Veronica. Going somewhere? Marcus asked, his voice flat. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. What do you want? The council wants to make sure you're available for tomorrow's hearing, Cole said, stepping into the room. They asked us to escort you back to the manor. Escort, Isabella repeated. You mean guard. Call it whatever you want, Marcus said. You're coming with us. Isabella looked at the door behind them, calculating her chances. She could scream, she could fight, she could try to run, but there were 3 of them and 1 of her, and they were trained enforcers built like tanks. She set her bag down slowly. Fine. They flanked her as they walked to the car, their presence suffocating. Isabella's mind raced. This wasn't protocol. The council didn't send enforcers to babysit witnesses unless they thought the witness was a threat, or unless someone wanted to make sure the witness didn't talk. They drove in silence back to the manor. But instead of taking her to the main house, they drove around to one of the outbuildings near the eastern fence line, a storage facility used for equipment and supplies. This isn't where the guest rooms are, Isabella said, trying to keep her voice steady. Council's orders, Marcus said. They led her inside, down a narrow hallway, and into a small room with concrete walls and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a cot in the corner. A chair. Nothing else. Isabella's stomach twisted. This is a holding cell. Temporary accommodations, Cole said.
Until the hearing. You can't keep me here, Isabella said, her voice rising. I haven't been charged with anything. Marcus crossed his arms. Take it up with the council tomorrow. They walked out and locked the door behind them. Isabella stood in the middle of the room, her breath coming in short gasps, panic clawing at her throat. She'd been so focused on bringing Veronica down that she hadn't considered what would happen if Veronica struck first. She paced the small space, her mind spinning. The text message. The warning. Someone had known this was coming, and she hadn't listened. Bum. Hours passed. Isabella sat on the cot, her back against the cold concrete wall, staring at the door. She'd tried the handle a dozen times, tried shouting, tried reasoning with the enforcers when they brought her water. Nothing worked. She was trapped. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. The lock clicked. The door opened. Damien stood there, his face drawn, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. Isabella stood slowly. What are you doing here? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I didn't know they were going to do this, but you let them, Isabella said bitterly. Damien flinched. I came to get you out. Isabella laughed, sharp and hollow. Now? After they locked me in a cell? Where was this energy when your mother was destroying my life? I know, Damien said quietly. I know I failed you. I know I was a coward, but I'm trying to fix it. You can't fix this, Isabella said. She gestured around the room. This is what your family does. They lock up problems. They bury people who get in their way, and you've been complicit in all of it. Damien's jaw tightened. My mother went behind my back. She manipulated the council. She convinced them you were a threat to PAC's stability. And you believed her, Isabella said flatly. Damien didn't answer. Isabella felt something inside her chest crack open. All of this because she made you think I was the problem, and you never once questioned her. She stepped closer to him, her voice low and venomous. You want to help me now? Then testify against her, tomorrow, in front of the council. Tell them the truth. I can't, Damien said. Then get out, Isabella said. Bella, get out! Damien stared at her for a long moment, his face twisted with guilt and helplessness. Then he turned and walked out, the door locking behind him with a final, damning click. Isabella sank back onto the cot, her whole body trembling. She'd lost. Not because she'd been wrong, not because she'd lacked courage, but because in a world built on power and loyalty and bloodlines, the truth was just another weapon people used when it suited them. And it had stopped suiting the Blackwoods the moment it threatened their control. The next evening, they brought her to the council chamber in handcuffs. She walked into the room with her head high, refusing to let them see the fear eating her alive from the inside. The council sat in a semicircle on the raised platform, their faces grave. Veronica stood off to the side, her expression calm and composed, like she was attending a board meeting. Elder Harlow gestured to the chair in the center of the room. Sit. Isabella sat, the metal cuffs digging into her wrists. Harlow opened a folder on the table in front of him. Isabella Hayes Blackwood, you've been brought before this council to answer for serious breaches of PAC law, breaking and entering, theft of confidential documents, conspiracy to undermine PAC leadership. Isabella's breath caught. Conspiracy? You accessed private files without authorization, Harlow continued. You conspired with outside parties to gather information intended to destabilize PAC hierarchy. These are not minor infractions. I was defending myself, Isabella said, her voice shaking. Everything I exposed was true. Veronica stole from this PAC. She forged documents. The council is aware of the allegations, Harlow interrupted, and we've investigated them thoroughly. And? Isabella demanded. Harlow exchanged glances with the other elders. The financial discrepancies you identified were the result of legitimate business transactions that you misinterpreted due to lack of context. Isabella's stomach dropped. What? The medical reports, another elder added, were preliminary drafts that were never officially filed. Their existence does not constitute fraud. They were used to justify bringing Serena here, Isabella protested. They were lies designed to make me look... Mrs. Blackwood, Harlow said firmly, you've made serious accusations without understanding the complexity of PAC governance. Your actions have caused significant disruption and damaged the reputation of a respected family. Isabella felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. She'd had proof, documents, evidence. Then she understood. They'd buried it. Veronica had convinced them to bury it, to reframe everything Isabella had found as misunderstandings and overreach, to turn Isabella from whistleblower into criminal. "This is a cover-up," Isabella said, her voice rising. "You're protecting her because she has power, and I don't." "Careful," one of the elders warned.
I was careful, Isabella snapped. I was careful and patient, and I played by the rules. And you're still punishing me because I dared to stand up to someone you're too afraid to challenge. The room went silent. Harlow's expression hardened. "Your conduct has been reviewed. The council's decision is final. You are hereby stripped of your title as Luna and exiled from Blackwood Pact territory. You have 24 hours to leave." The words landed like a death sentence. Isabella stared at him, unable to breathe. Exiled. Furthermore, Harlow continued, should you attempt to contact any member of this pack or spread further accusations against the Blackwood family, you will be considered a hostile entity and dealt with accordingly. Isabella felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "You're making a mistake." "No," Harlow said quietly. "You made the mistake when you forgot your place." They unlocked her cuffs and escorted her out of the chamber. Isabella walked through the corridors of Blackwood Manor one last time, past the portraits of ancestors who'd built this empire on the backs of people like her, past the rooms where she'd tried so hard to belong, past the life she'd thought she was building. When they reached the main entrance, Marcus handed her a single bag containing her belongings. "You have until tomorrow night," he said. "After that, you're trespassing." Isabella took the bag, her hands numb. She walked down the front steps and kept walking until the manor disappeared behind her, and the night swallowed her whole. She drove for hours. No destination, no plan, just away. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from Serena, missed calls from Damien, a voicemail from Elder Harlow reminding her of the terms of her exile. She ignored all of it. Around dawn, she pulled over at a rest stop and finally let herself brake. She screamed into the steering wheel until her voice gave out. She punched the dashboard until her knuckles bled. She cried until there was nothing left inside her but a hollow, aching rage. When the sun came up, she sat in the parking lot watching the light spread across the sky and realized something. She'd been playing their game by their rules. She'd tried to be the good Luna, the obedient wife, the patient victim who gathered evidence and followed protocol and believed the system would protect her if she just did everything right. But the system was never designed to protect people like her. It was designed to protect people like Veronica. And if Isabella wanted to survive, she needed to stop playing by their rules entirely. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the one number she'd been avoiding, Alpha Adrian Knight. He ran the neighboring territory, a smaller pack with a reputation for independence and unconventional leadership. They'd met once at a regional summit, and he'd given her his number, telling her if she ever needed anything to call. She'd thought it was just politeness. Now, it felt like a lifeline. She dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Isabella? I need help," she said, her voice hoarse. There was a pause. "Where are you?" she told him. "Stay there," Adrian said. "I'm coming to get you." Clacked. She waited in the parking lot as the sun climbed higher, exhaustion weighing her down like concrete. She dozed off at some point and woke to the sound of tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled up beside her car. The driver's door opened and Adrian stepped out. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen more than their share of trouble. He wore jeans and a leather jacket, nothing like the formal suits the Blackwood men favored. He walked over to her window. She rolled it down. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks," Isabella said flatly. His expression softened. "Come on, you can leave your car here. I'll have someone pick it up later." She was too tired to argue. She grabbed her bag and followed him to the SUV. They drove in silence for a while. Isabella stared out the window, watching the landscape change from Blackwood territory to neutral ground to the borders of Nightland. Finally, Adrian spoke. "You want to tell me what happened?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "I tried to do the right thing, and it destroyed me." He glanced at her. "Doing the right thing usually does." She looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've been where you are," Adrian said. "And I know what it's like when the people who are supposed to protect you decide you're disposable instead." Isabella felt something loosen in her chest, a tiny crack in the armor she'd built around herself. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Adrian said, "you rest, you heal, and when you're ready, you decide who you want to be next."
She closed her eyes, leaning her head against the window. I don't know how to be anyone anymore. Then we'll figure it out together, Adrian said. And for the first time in weeks, Isabella felt like maybe she could breathe again. But she also knew, deep in the part of her that had learned to survive, that this wasn't the end.
It was just the beginning of something darker. Because she'd tried mercy. She'd tried truth. And now she was done trying. Isabella spent her first week in Night Territory learning how to be invisible again. Adrian's estate was nothing like Blackwood Manor. Where the Blackwood house sprawled across manicured lawns with marble columns and ancestral portraits, Adrian's home was a converted warehouse on the edge of industrial land, all exposed brick and steel beams and windows that looked out over forests instead of gardens. It felt honest in a way the manor never had, like it wasn't trying to prove anything. Adrian gave her a room on the third floor with a view of the mountains and told her she could stay as long as she needed. No conditions, no expectations, just space to breathe. She spent those first days sleeping 16 hours at a time, waking up disoriented and hollow. Her body was exhausted from months of fighting. Her mind kept replaying the council hearing, Veronica's triumphant face, the sound of the door locking behind her in that cell. But something else was growing beneath the exhaustion, something cold and sharp and patient. On the 8th day, she stopped sleeping so much. She started eating properly. She began running in the mornings, pushing her body until her lungs burned and her legs screamed, because physical pain was easier to manage than the other kind. And she started planning. Not revenge, not yet. Survival first, then everything else. Bossuk. Adrian found her in his library 2 weeks after she'd arrived, surrounded by books on pack law and territorial governance. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Light reading? Isabella looked up. I'm trying to understand how Veronica got away with it, how she convinced an entire council to ignore evidence. Adrian walked in, pouring himself coffee from the pot on the side table. Because evidence doesn't matter if the people evaluating it have more to lose from believing you than protecting the person you're accusing. Isabella closed the book in front of her. So I was doomed from the start. Not doomed, Adrian said, just playing the wrong game. She looked at him. What's the right game? He sat down across from her, his expression serious. You went after her reputation, her position. But Veronica's power doesn't come from titles. It comes from control. Financial control. Political control. Control over information and alliances. You proved she's corrupt, but you didn't take away the things that make her untouchable. Isabella felt her pulse quicken. So how do you take those away? Adrian smiled, but there was no humor in it. You build something she can't ignore, something that threatens the foundation of her power instead of just embarrassing her publicly. Like what? Like an alternative, Adrian said. A pack that operates differently, that values different things, that shows everyone watching that the Blackwood way isn't the only way. Isabella stared at him. You want me to start a pack? I want you to help me expand mine, Adrian said. I've been building alliances for years with smaller territories that are tired of being bullied by families like the Blackwoods. We're creating a coalition, a network where strength comes from collaboration instead of domination. He leaned forward. Veronica exiled you because she thought that would destroy you, but exile also freed you. You don't owe the Blackwoods anything anymore, and that makes you dangerous. Isabella felt something stir in her chest. Dangerous how? Because you know how they operate, Adrian said. You know their weaknesses, and you're still standing. That terrifies people like Veronica more than any scandal ever could. She let his words settle. You're talking about war. I'm talking about evolution, Adrian corrected. The old families have been running things the same way for generations. But the world is changing. Younger wolves don't want to live under dynasties that treat them like property. They want leadership that actually gives a damn about their lives. He gestured to the books around them. What Veronica did to you wasn't unique, Isabella. She's done it to dozens of people over the years, exiled anyone who threatened her, crushed anyone who questioned her. The only difference is you documented it. You stood up, you survived, and that makes you a symbol, whether you want to be or not. Isabella's throat tightened. I just wanted justice. Justice is a luxury, Adrian said quietly. Survival is a necessity. But if you survive long enough, sometimes you get the chance to build something better than what you escaped. She thought about his words for days. She'd spent so much time trying to fit into the Blackwood world that she'd never considered there might be other options, other ways to live, other definitions of power.
But the idea of building something felt impossible. She was exhausted, broken, barely holding herself together. And yet,
There was something seductive about it. The thought of turning her exile into a foundation instead of an ending, of proving to Veronica and Damien and every person who'd dismissed her that she was more than they'd ever imagined, not for revenge, for herself. 3 weeks after arriving at Night Territory, Isabella agreed to help Adrian. Not as Luna, not as anything official, just as someone who understood how families like the Blackwoods operated and wanted to help build an alternative. It started small. She attended meetings with other pack leaders who were part of Adrian's coalition. She shared her story carefully, strategically, showing them the documents she'd saved proving Veronica's corruption. She helped draft new governance models that emphasized transparency and accountability, and slowly, she began to realize something. She was good at this. Not the ceremonial parts of being Luna, not the smiling and the hostessing and the playing nice, but the strategy, the negotiation, the careful building of alliances based on mutual benefit instead of fear. She'd spent so long thinking she wasn't strong enough for the Blackwood world that she'd never realized the problem wasn't her strength. It was that their version of strength was fundamentally broken. True strength wasn't domination. It was resilience, adaptability, the ability to survive being destroyed and find a way to rebuild yourself into something they couldn't destroy the same way twice. And Isabella was discovering she had that in abundance. Bapas. 2 months after her exile, Isabella received a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the border. Midnight. Come alone. She stared at the text for a long time. Serena. Part of her wanted to delete it, to ignore anything connected to that family and that nightmare. But curiosity won. She told Adrian where she was going. He offered to send backup, but she refused. If this was a trap, she wanted to see it coming. She drove to the border between Night and Blackwood territory just before midnight, parking her car on the neutral ground between fence lines. The night was cold and clear, the moon nearly full overhead. She waited. At 12:15, headlights appeared down the road. A car pulled up beside hers. The door opened. Serena stepped out. She looked different, thinner, her hair pulled back severely, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. They stood on opposite sides of the invisible line, neither crossing. You came, Serena said quietly. What do you want? Isabella asked. Serena wrapped her arms around herself. To warn you. Isabella's stomach tightened. About what? Veronica knows what you're doing, Serena said. Building alliances with Adrian, talking to other packs. She knows you're trying to create a coalition against her. Good, Isabella said coldly. Let her know. You don't understand, Serena pressed. She's not just angry, she's scared. And when Veronica gets scared, people get hurt. Isabella took a step closer. Why do you care? Because I'm trapped there, Serena said, her voice breaking. After you left, everything fell apart. The pack elders started asking questions about the financial records you exposed. Veronica blamed me, said I helped you. Now she's watching my every move. I can't leave. I can't even talk to my own family without her permission. Tears streamed down her face. I thought I was getting power when I agreed to this, but I'm just another prisoner in that house, just like you were. Isabella felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but mostly she felt exhausted. I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I can't help you. I'm not asking you to help me, Serena said. I'm asking you to be careful. Veronica is planning something. I don't know what, but I've heard her on the phone making arrangements, moving money, calling in favors from other packs. She looked at Isabella desperately. Whatever you're building with Adrian, she's going to try to destroy it, and she won't stop until you're dead or broken beyond repair. Isabella's jaw tightened. Then she's going to have to try harder than last time. Serena shook her head. You still don't get it. She doesn't play fair. She doesn't follow rules. She'll burn down everything you care about just to make sure you lose. Then I'll rebuild, Isabella said. I've done it before. Serena stared at her for a long moment. You've changed. I had to, Isabella said simply. Serena nodded slowly. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a flash drive. This has everything I could find. Her current accounts, contracts she's hiding, names of people she's paying off. I don't know if it'll help, but it's all I have. She held it out across the boundary line. Isabella hesitated, then she took it. Why are you doing this? Isabella asked. Because I'm tired of being afraid, Serena said quietly. and because someone should have done it for you when you were alone in that house. She got back in her car without another word and drove away. Isabella stood in the darkness, holding the flash drive, feeling the weight of it like a loaded gun. She gave the drive to Adrian the next morning. He plugged it into his computer, and they spent hours going through the files. Financial records, emails, audio recordings of phone conversations Serena must have secretly captured. It was worse than Isabella had imagined. Veronica hadn't just been stealing from her own pack. She'd been embezzling from the regional council funds, money that was supposed to go toward infrastructure and emergency services for all the territories. She'd been blackmailing other pack leaders with fabricated scandals. She'd orchestrated the removal of 3 separate alphas who'd opposed her over the years. And now she was planning something bigger. Adrian froze on one particular email chain. His face went pale. "What?" Isabella asked. He turned the screen toward her. It was a message from Veronica to someone named Marcus Volkov, an alpha from the Northern Territories known for violence and expansion. The message was brief. The Night Coalition poses a threat to regional stability. They're harboring a fugitive who attempted to undermine pack governance. I'm prepared to support a territorial challenge if you're willing to file one. We can split the land afterward. Isabella's blood went cold. She's trying to get another pack to attack Adrian. Adrian's expression was grim. It's called a proxy war. She can't move against me directly without the council intervening. But if she convinces Volkov I'm destabilizing the region, he can challenge my territorial rights. And if he wins, she gets half my land without ever lifting a finger. When is this supposed to happen? Isabella asked. Adrian scrolled through more messages. The Moonlight Summit. 3 weeks from now. It's the one gathering where territorial challenges can be officially filed in front of all the regional alphas. Isabella's mind raced. Can you fight it? I can try, Adrian said, but Volkov has twice the numbers I do. And if Veronica's backing him financially, he'll have resources I can't match. He looked at her. This is what she does, Isabella. She doesn't just destroy individuals. She destroys anything that threatens the order she's built. And your coalition with me? That's the biggest threat she's faced in decades. Isabella felt rage burning in her chest. Then we expose her before she can make her move. How? Adrian asked. At the summit, in front of everyone. Yes, Isabella said. We bring evidence. We show every alpha there what she's really been doing. We make it impossible for them to ignore. Adrian shook his head. You tried that once. It didn't work. Because I was alone, Isabella said, and because I was trying to play by their rules. But we have more evidence now. We have Serena's recordings. We have proof she's been stealing from the regional council. She leaned forward. And we have something she doesn't expect. Me. Standing in front of all those alphas. Alive. Strong. Everything she tried to destroy. Adrian studied her face. This is dangerous, Isabella. If it backfires, she won't just exile you again. She'll make sure you disappear permanently. Then we make sure it doesn't backfire, Isabella said. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Isabella and Adrian worked around the clock preparing. They organized their evidence into an airtight presentation. They reached out to every alpha in the coalition, securing commitments that they'd stand with them at the summit. They hired private investigators to verify Serena's information and dig up even more. And Isabella trained. She spent hours every day working with Adrian's security team, learning self-defense, learning how to move through hostile spaces, learning how to project authority even when she was terrified. Because she knew when she stood up at that summit, Veronica would try to tear her apart, verbally, psychologically, maybe even physically. And Isabella needed to be ready. She also knew there was a chance this would all go wrong, that Veronica would have contingencies they hadn't anticipated, that the other alphas would side with tradition over truth. But she'd stopped caring about the odds. She'd tried being careful, being quiet, being obedient, and it had nearly killed her. Now she was done calculating, done strategizing around other people's comfort. She was going to stand up and tell the truth. And if the world burned down around her, at least she'd burn knowing she'd tried. The night before the summit, Adrian found her on the roof of the warehouse, staring out at the mountains. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting beside her. Too much to think about, Isabella said. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Adrian spoke. You know you don't have to do this. I can present the evidence myself. You don't have to put yourself in front of her again. Yes, I do, Isabella said quietly. Because this isn't just about stopping her. It's about proving something. What? That she didn't break me, Isabella said, that everything she did just made me stronger, and that the version of power she represents is dying. She looked at him. People like Veronica think power is about control, about fear, about making everyone around you smaller so you seem bigger. But real power is different. It's about building something that doesn't need fear to survive. It's about being strong enough to lift others up instead of tearing them down. Adrian smiled. You sound like a Luna. Isabella shook her head. I sound like someone who learned the hard way that titles don't mean anything. Actions do. She stood, looking out at the territory spread below them. Tomorrow, I'm going to stand in front of everyone who ever dismissed me and show them exactly what they threw away. And if they still don't listen, then at least I'll know I tried, Isabella said, and I'll keep building until they have no choice but to pay attention. The Moonlight Summit was held in a massive amphitheater carved into the side of a mountain, neutral ground that had hosted pack gatherings for over a century. Hundreds of wolves gathered, alphas, council members, enforcers, all dressed in formal attire that looked more like armor than clothing. Isabella arrived with Adrian and his delegation, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wore black, simple, severe. No jewelry, no makeup, just herself. As they entered the amphitheater, she felt eyes turning toward her, whispers spreading. That's the Blackwood exile. I heard she tried to destroy Veronica. She looks different than I expected. Isabella kept her chin up, her stride steady. She'd learned that confidence was sometimes just the decision to keep moving forward, even when every instinct screamed to run. They took their seats in the coalition section. Isabella scanned the crowd and found them immediately. Veronica sat in the Blackwood section, regal in deep purple, her expression serene. Damien sat beside her, looking uncomfortable. Serena was nowhere to be seen. Veronica's eyes met Isabella's across the amphitheater, and she smiled, cold, victorious, like she'd already won. Isabella felt ice settle in her veins. The summit began with formalities, territory reports, trade agreements, all the boring bureaucracy that kept the peace between packs. Then came the challenges. The moderator stood. Are there any territorial disputes to be filed? Marcus Volkov stood from the northern section. I challenge Alpha Adrian Knight's territorial claim on the grounds of destabilizing regional governance and harboring fugitives. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Adrian stood. I reject the challenge as baseless and request the right to present evidence of conspiracy behind this filing. The moderator nodded. Proceed. Adrian walked to the center floor. He laid out the case methodically, showing the emails between Veronica and Volkov, the financial arrangements, the proof that this wasn't a legitimate territorial concern, but a manufactured conflict designed to eliminate a political rival. The amphitheater was silent as he spoke. When he finished, the moderator turned to Volkov. How do you respond? Volkov stood, his face red. These allegations are... He never finished the sentence, because Isabella stood. Every eye in the amphitheater turned to her. The moderator frowned. The floor has not been yielded to you, Mrs. Blackwood. With respect, Isabella said, her voice carrying across the space, I have evidence relevant to this proceeding. Evidence that Alpha Volkov's challenge is part of a larger pattern of corruption that has been poisoning pack governance for years. Veronica rose slowly. This is inappropriate. She has no standing here. She has the standing of truth. Elder Harlow's voice rang out. Isabella turned in shock. Harlow stood in the Blackwood section, his weathered face grave. I've reviewed the evidence Mrs. Blackwood provided, Harlow continued, and I believe the council and this summit needs to hear it. Veronica's face went white. The moderator hesitated, then nodded. Proceed, Mrs. Blackwood. Isabella walked to the center floor, her knees shaking but her voice steady. She pulled out the documents, the recordings, everything, and she told them everything. Not just about Veronica's corruption, but about the system that enabled it. The way power consolidated around families who used fear and tradition to maintain control. The way voices like hers were silenced not because they were wrong, but because they were inconvenient. She talked about being brought into a family under false pretenses, about being humiliated and gaslit, and eventually exiled for daring to tell the truth. And she showed them proof of all of it. When she finished, the amphitheater was silent enough to hear breathing. Then Veronica stood. Her voice was cold and sharp as a blade. You stand here playing victim, but everything that happened to you was the consequence of your own actions. You broke pack law. You stole confidential information. You attempted to undermine leadership during a time of transition. She gestured broadly. And now you align yourself with Adrian Knight, who's been trying to destabilize regional governance for years by encouraging younger wolves to reject tradition and hierarchy. She turned to address the whole summit. This is not about corruption. This is about a bitter, rejected woman trying to destroy the family that gave her everything because she couldn't accept that she wasn't good enough. The words hung in the air like poison. Isabella felt rage surge through her, white-hot and purifying. She stepped forward. You're right about one thing. I wasn't good enough for your family, because being good enough meant being silent while you stole. Being good enough meant accepting humiliation with a smile. Being good enough meant letting you destroy me to protect your empire. Her voice rose. But I'm not here asking for your forgiveness or your acceptance. I'm here showing everyone what you really are. Not a leader, a tyrant. Someone who maintains power through fear and manipulation and crushing anyone brave enough to challenge you. She looked around at all the faces watching. And I'm here to tell every wolf in this amphitheater that there's another way. A way where strength comes from integrity instead of intimidation. Where leadership means serving your pack instead of ruling it. She turned back to Veronica. You exiled me thinking it would destroy me, but all you did was free me to become someone you could never control. Veronica's eyes blazed with fury. You have no idea what you've started. Yes, I do, Isabella said quietly. I've started the end of your reign. The moderator stepped forward. The council will review all evidence presented and render judgment within... He never finished. Because Veronica moved. Fast. Faster than Isabella expected. She crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, her hand striking out toward Isabella's throat with claws extended. Isabella barely dodged, stumbling backward. Adrian lunged forward, but enforcers blocked him. Veronica circled Isabella like a predator. You want to destroy me? Try it, right here, right now. The amphitheater erupted in chaos, wolves shouting, enforcers trying to restore order, the moderator calling for calm. But Isabella saw it clearly now. Veronica had planned this. The rage, the attack. Because if she could provoke Isabella into a physical altercation, she could claim self-defense. Claim Isabella was unstable, dangerous. It was one last manipulation. Isabella straightened, meeting Veronica's eyes. No. Veronica's lips curled. Coward. Smart, Isabella corrected. I'm not giving you an excuse to play victim. Not anymore. She turned to face the council. I've presented my evidence. I've told my story. Now it's up to all of you to decide what kind of packs you want to lead. One's built on fear. Or one's built on something better. She walked back to her seat, her whole body shaking but her head high. Veronica stood in the center of the floor, isolated, her fury naked and ugly for everyone to see. And in that moment, Isabella knew. She'd won. Not the verdict, not yet. But something more important. She'd taken back her voice, her dignity, her power. And no matter what happened next, Veronica could never take that away again. The moderator's voice cut through the noise. This summit is suspended pending full investigation. All parties will remain... The lights went out. Complete darkness. Then screams. And in the chaos, Isabella felt hands grab her from behind, something cold and sharp pressed against her throat, and a voice she recognized hissing in her ear. You should have stayed broken. The blade against Isabella's throat was cold enough to burn. She stood frozen in the darkness of the amphitheater, acutely aware of every sound around her, the screams, the chaos, the thundering of feet as wolves scrambled to find the exits or their allies. Her pulse hammered against the metal, pressing into her skin, and she knew with absolute certainty that one wrong move would open her throat before anyone could stop it. You should have stayed broken, the voice repeated, and Isabella recognized it now. Not Veronica. Damien. Her breath caught. What are you doing? His voice was raw, shredded. What I should have done months ago, ending this before you destroy everything. The lights flickered back on in stages, emergency power flooding the amphitheater with harsh white light. Isabella could see now, Damien behind her, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation, his hand shaking as he held the blade. Around them, enforcers were moving in slowly, hands raised, trying to calm the situation. Adrian was frozen 10 feet away, his eyes locked on Isabella, his body coiled like he was calculating whether he could reach her before Damien finished what he'd started. Let her go, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. Damien laughed, bitter and broken. So you can take her?
So she can keep tearing my family apart in front of everyone? Your family tore itself apart, Isabella said quietly, carefully. Her throat moved against the blade with each word. I just showed people what was already there.
You ruined us, Damien hissed. My mother is disgraced. The pack is fracturing. Everything we built for generations is collapsing because you couldn't just accept your place. Isabella felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Something colder. My place was beside you, as your wife, your equal. But you never saw me that way. None of you did. Because you weren't equal, Damien said. You came from nothing. You had no lineage, no power, no right to challenge how we ran things. And there it was. The truth he'd never said out loud while they were married. The belief that had rotted their relationship from the inside. So you brought in Serena, Isabella said. Someone you thought was worthy. Someone your mother could control. Damien's grip tightened on the blade. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You were supposed to step aside quietly, take the pension, live your life somewhere else, but you had to make it a war. You made it a war the moment you let your mother treat me like property, Isabella said. The enforcers were closer now. Isabella could see Elder Harlow among them, his face grave. Son, Harlow called out, think about what you're doing. I am thinking, Damien said, and his voice cracked. I'm thinking that everything I was taught about honor and legacy and duty was a lie. I'm thinking that I destroyed the only person who actually loved me because I was too weak to stand up to my mother. I'm thinking that I deserve this. All of it. His hand trembled harder. But I'm not letting you walk away victorious. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Isabella felt the blade nick her skin. A warm trickle of blood ran down her throat. Then do it, she said quietly. The amphitheater went silent. Damien's breath hitched. What? If killing me is the only way you can feel powerful again, then do it, Isabella said. But know that it won't change anything. Your mother will still be exposed. Your pack will still be fractured. And you'll still be the man who was too weak to protect the woman he married. She swallowed carefully. I spent months believing I wasn't enough for you. That I needed to be stronger, smarter, more worthy. But I was always enough. You just never had the courage to see it. Damien's face contorted. Stop talking. I survived you, Isabella continued. I survived your mother. I survived being exiled and humiliated and nearly destroyed. And I built something better than anything the Blackwoods ever created. Her voice was steady now, almost gentle. So if you want to kill me, go ahead. But it won't erase the fact that I won. Not because I destroyed you, but because I refused to let you destroy me. The silence stretched out like a wire pulled taut. Then Damien's hand dropped. The blade clattered to the floor. He sank to his knees, his face in his hands, his whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside him for years. Isabella stepped away slowly, her hand going to her throat. The cut was shallow, painful, but not dangerous. Enforcers moved in immediately, pulling Damien to his feet, restraining him even though he wasn't resisting anymore. He looked hollowed out, broken in a way that had nothing to do with physical injury and everything to do with the collapse of every illusion he'd built his life around. Adrian reached Isabella in 2 strides, his hands on her shoulders. Are you okay? Isabella nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. The moderator's voice cut through the chaos. This summit is officially suspended pending immediate investigation. All participants are to remain in the vicinity until the council renders judgment. But Isabella knew the judgment had already been rendered. Not by the council. By everyone who'd watched Damien hold a blade to his own wife's throat in front of hundreds of witnesses. By everyone who'd seen Veronica's fury and manipulation exposed in brutal detail. The Blackwoods were finished, not destroyed, not exiled, but irreversibly diminished. The empire Veronica had spent decades building had cracked wide open, and no amount of damage control would seal it again. They held Isabella in a medical tent for 2 hours while pack physicians examined her throat and gave her something for the shock she kept insisting she didn't feel. Adrian stayed with her the entire time, his presence solid and grounding. When they finally released her, she walked out to find Veronica waiting. The older woman stood alone near the edge of the encampment, her perfect posture finally showing cracks. She looked smaller somehow, still dangerous, still sharp, but no longer untouchable. They stared at each other across 10 feet of neutral ground. You got what you wanted, Veronica said finally. Her voice was ice over exhaustion. My reputation destroyed, my family broken, My son a disgrace. I wanted justice, Isabella corrected. This is just the consequence of your choices. Veronica's lips curled. Justice. Such a pretty word for revenge. Call it whatever you want, Isabella said. It doesn't change what you did. To me. To Serena. To everyone you've crushed over the years to maintain your control. She took a step closer. You taught me something important, though. You taught me that power built on fear is fragile, and that the only thing more dangerous than someone who has nothing is someone who's already lost everything and learned they can survive it. Veronica studied her for a long moment. You think you've won, but you have no idea what it costs to build something that lasts, what it takes to maintain order, to keep wolves from tearing each other apart. Maybe I don't, Isabella admitted, but I know what it costs to tear people down, and I know that kind of leadership doesn't last. It just creates survivors like me who eventually fight back. She turned to walk away, then paused. I don't forgive you. I probably never will. But I'm done letting you take up space in my head. You're not worth the energy anymore. Veronica said nothing as Isabella walked away. And Isabella realized that was the truest victory, not destroying Veronica, not even exposing her, but reaching the point where Veronica's opinion simply didn't matter anymore. The council's judgment came 3 days later. They gathered in a smaller venue this time, just the key players and witnesses. Isabella sat between Adrian and Elder Harlow, her hands folded calmly in her lap, even though her heart was racing. The head counselor stood, her voice formal and final. After thorough investigation of the evidence presented, this council finds Veronica Blackwood guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy against fellow pack leaders. She is hereby stripped of all titles and authority within regional governance and banned from holding any leadership position for life. Murmurs ran through the room. Furthermore, the council continued, Damian Blackwood is found guilty of assault and unbecoming conduct during a formal summit. He is stripped of his position as alpha heir and will serve a probationary period under council supervision. Damian sat in the front row, staring at his hands. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. Regarding the territorial challenge filed by Alpha Marcus Volkov, the council finds the challenge fraudulent and motivated by external conspiracy. Alpha Adrian Knight's territorial rights are affirmed and protected. Adrian exhaled slowly beside her. Finally, the counselor turned to Isabella. Isabella Hayes Blackwood, your exile from Blackwood territory is formally recognized as invalid. However, given the dissolution of your marriage and the circumstances surrounding your departure, you are granted full autonomy to choose your pack affiliation going forward. Isabella stood slowly. Thank you, but I've already made my choice. The counselor nodded. Then this matter is concluded. The room began to empty. Isabella watched Veronica and Damian leave together, Veronica's spine still straight despite everything, Damian walking like a ghost beside her. Part of Isabella wanted to feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly she just felt tired. She'd won, but winning looked a lot less satisfying than she'd imagined. 2 weeks later, Isabella stood in Adrian's office signing the final paperwork that would officially make her a member of Knight Pack and his co-leader in the coalition they were building. Adrian handed her a pen. You're sure about this? Once you sign, you're committed. No backing out when things get complicated. Things are always complicated, Isabella said, taking the pen. At least this time I'm choosing the complications myself. She signed her name, the motion feeling both monumental and strangely simple. Adrian smiled. Welcome to the pack, Luna. Isabella shook her head. Not Luna, just Isabella. Let's figure out what that means together. Fair enough, Adrian said. Over the following months, they did exactly that. They built a leadership structure that valued input over hierarchy. They created policies protecting wolves from the kind of manipulation and abuse Isabella had endured. They established trade agreements with smaller packs that had been excluded from regional councils for years. It was exhausting, messy, sometimes frustrating, but it was hers. Built on her terms, with people who valued her mind and her strength instead of trying to diminish both. And slowly, Isabella began to recognize herself again. Not the woman who'd walked into Blackwood Manor believing marriage would save her. Not the broken exile who'd fled with nothing but rage and survival instinct. Someone new. Someone forged in fire and tempered by betrayal and rebuilt from the ground up with hard-won wisdom and scars that told stories of battles she'd survived. She learned that real power wasn't about controlling others.
It was about maintaining control of yourself when everything was falling apart. It was about choosing integrity over convenience, about building others up instead of tearing them down to make yourself seem taller. She learned that forgiveness wasn't about letting people off the hook. It was about freeing yourself from the weight of carrying their crimes around in your chest. She still hadn't forgiven Veronica or Damien. Maybe she never would, but she'd stopped letting their betrayal define her entire existence. And she learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you were broken and then do the brutal work of putting yourself back together piece by painful piece until you're not the same person who broke but someone entirely new. Someone who knows exactly how much they can survive. 6 months after the summit, Isabella received an unexpected visitor. Serena appeared at the Knight Estate on a gray afternoon, looking thinner and older than Isabella remembered. She stood at the gate nervously until Isabella walked out to meet her. They hadn't spoken since that midnight meeting at the border. "I didn't know if you'd see me," Serena said quietly. "I almost didn't," Isabella admitted, but curiosity won. They walked through the grounds in silence for a while, neither quite sure how to bridge the gap between them. Finally, Serena spoke. "I left. 2 weeks after the summit. I couldn't stay there anymore." "Where did you go?" Isabella asked. "Back to my family at first," Serena said, "but that didn't last. They blamed me for the scandal, said I'd embarrassed them by helping you." She kicked at a stone on the path. "So I've been staying with a friend in the city, working at a bookstore, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for someone else's expectations." Isabella felt an unexpected kinship with that. "I know what that's like. I came to apologize," Serena said, stopping to face her. "For all of it. For agreeing to come between you and Damien. For not being brave enough to walk away sooner. For only helping when it benefited me." Isabella studied her face. "You were trapped too. I understand that now." Serena's eyes filled with tears. "But you fought your way out. I just waited for someone to rescue me." "So learn from it," Isabella said gently. "Learn that no one's coming to rescue you, that you have to rescue yourself. And then figure out what you want your life to look like when you're the one making the decisions." Serena nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm trying. It's harder than I thought." "Everything worth doing is," Isabella said. They walked a bit further. Then Serena asked quietly, "Do you think you'll ever go back to Blackwood territory?" Isabella shook her head. "That was never really home. It was just a place I stayed while I figured out who I actually was. And now you know?" Isabella smiled slightly. "I'm getting closer." A year after her exile, Isabella stood before a gathering of 200 wolves from 17 different packs, the first official assembly of the coalition she and Adrian had spent months building. She looked out at their faces and saw hope mixed with skepticism, mixed with cautious optimism. They were wolves who'd been overlooked by the old power structures, who'd been deemed not important enough or not pure enough or not traditional enough to have a real voice. Now they had one. Isabella had prepared a speech. Something formal about unity and strength and building a better future. But standing there looking at all those faces, the formal words felt hollow, so she spoke from the gut instead. "A year ago, I was exiled from my pack. I'd been married into one of the most powerful families in the region, and I lost everything because I dared to tell the truth about corruption and abuse." Her voice carried clear and strong. "For a long time, I thought that exile was the worst thing that could happen to me. That losing my title and my marriage and my place in that world meant I'd failed." She paused. "But I was wrong. Exile didn't destroy me. It freed me. It forced me to build something new instead of trying to fix something that was rotten at its foundation." She looked around at the assembled wolves. "We're here because all of us have been told at some point that we're not enough, not strong enough, not connected enough, not important enough to matter. But we matter. And this coalition exists to prove it. To show that real strength comes from collaboration instead of domination, from lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down." Her voice grew stronger. "The old families want you to believe that power is about bloodlines and titles and maintaining traditions that benefit the few at the expense of the many. But we're building something different, a system where your worth isn't determined by your last name, but by your actions, your character, your willingness to fight for something better." She saw heads nodding, eyes brightening, and felt something settle in her chest. Not pride exactly, more like purpose. "So I'm not here as a Luna or a lady or any title someone else gave me," Isabella continued. I'm here as someone who survived being broken and learned that survival isn't the same as victory. Victory is what you build after you survive. She gestured broadly. This is our victory, not destroying the old families, but proving we don't need them to thrive, that we can create our own legacy, write our own rules, and build a future where no one has to choose between their integrity and their survival. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. Isabella stepped back, her legs shaking, her heart full of something she hadn't felt in over a year. Not happiness exactly, something deeper, more complex. The bone-deep satisfaction of knowing she'd walked through fire and come out the other side still herself, still fighting, still building, and that was more than enough. That night, Isabella sat alone in her room, a letter in her hands. It had arrived that afternoon, forwarded from 3 different addresses before finding her. The handwriting on the envelope was elegant but shaky. She'd almost thrown it away without opening it, but curiosity won again. The letter was from Damien. Isabella, I know I have no right to write to you, no right to ask for your time or attention or even your acknowledgement that this letter exists, but I need you to know something, even if you never respond. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what strength looks like. About what leadership means. About what I owed you as your husband and your partner. I let my mother destroy the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too weak to see what was happening until it was too late. I chose loyalty to her over loyalty to you. I chose tradition over truth, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. You were right when you said I destroyed the only person who actually loved me. I did, and I deserve every consequence that came from it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to respond. I don't expect it. I just need you to know that you were always enough, more than enough, and my failure to see that is the biggest mistake I'll ever make. I hope you're building something beautiful. I hope you're surrounded by people who value you the way I should have. And I hope someday when you think about our time together, the pain of it fades, and all you remember is that you survived something that would have broken most people. You're extraordinary, Isabella. You always were. I'm sorry I never told you that when it mattered. D. Isabella read the letter 3 times. Then she walked to the fireplace and held it over the flames. She thought about burning it, about turning his apology into ash and letting it represent the finality of that chapter of her life. But instead she pulled it back, folded it carefully, and put it in a drawer. Not because she forgave him, not because she wanted him back, but because it was a reminder that the people who hurt you sometimes realize what they've lost, that the pain you survive becomes part of your story but doesn't have to be the whole story, and that moving forward didn't require erasing the past, just learning from it. She thought about responding, thought about telling Damien that she'd hurt him, that his apology mattered even if it didn't change anything, but she decided against it. Some doors needed to stay closed, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. She'd given Damien enough of herself, more than he'd ever deserved, and she wasn't going to give him more just because he'd finally figured out what he'd thrown away. So she left the letter in the drawer, closed it firmly, and went to bed, and slept without nightmares for the first time in over a year. Ishag. 3 years after her exile, Isabella stood on a platform before the Moonlight Summit once again. But this time, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't exposing corruption or fighting for survival. She was being formally recognized as Alpha of the Night Coalition, a network that now encompassed 32 packs and had fundamentally reshaped how regional governance operated. Adrian stood beside her, smiling as he formally transferred leadership. He'd spent the last 6 months preparing to step back, focusing on his family and his own pack, while Isabella took the lead on coalition affairs. They'd argued about it, Isabella insisting she didn't need the title, Adrian insisting she'd earned it. In the end, she'd accepted. Not because she needed validation, but because turning it down would have been false modesty, and she was done pretending to be smaller than she actually was. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate rituals, no bloodline declarations, just a recognition of leadership earned through action and respect freely given. When it was over, Isabella looked out at the assembled packs and saw something she never thought she'd see. Respect, not for her title, for her. And in the back of the amphitheater, she saw 2 familiar faces, Veronica and Damien, watching from the shadows, no longer part of the power structure but unable to stay away entirely. Their eyes met across the distance. Veronica's expression was unreadable.
Damien's was regret incarnate. Isabella held their gaze for a moment, then she turned away. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because they simply didn't matter to her anymore. They were part of her history, part of the story of how she became who she was. But they weren't part of her future, and that was the final victory. Not destroying them, not even beating them, but reaching the point where their presence or absence in her life made no difference to her peace. That evening, Isabella walked alone to the edge of the summit grounds, where the forest met the clearing and the sounds of celebration faded into the quiet of nature. She thought about the woman she'd been when this all started, the Isabella who'd believed marriage would save her, who'd thought belonging to a powerful family would make her matter, who'd been willing to make herself smaller and quieter and less to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be. That Isabella was gone, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into someone who understood that the only approval that mattered was her own. That power wasn't something you took from others, but something you built within yourself through the brutal work of surviving impossible situations and choosing to keep going anyway. She'd learned that betrayal could break you or teach you, that exile could destroy you or free you, that rock bottom wasn't the end of your story unless you decided to stop there. She'd learned that real strength looked nothing like the Blackwoods had taught her. It wasn't about dominance or control or making others fear you. It was about maintaining integrity when it cost you everything, about standing up even when you knew you'd probably lose, about building something better from the wreckage of what destroyed you. And she'd learned that you could survive being replaced, humiliated, exiled, and nearly killed, and still come out the other side as someone worth being. Someone you could look at in the mirror without flinching, someone who knew exactly how much they could endure and exactly how much they were worth. She stood there as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, and felt something she'd been chasing for years finally settle in her chest. Not happiness, not even contentment. Peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've fought your way through hell and earned every scar. That you've made mistakes and survived them. That you've been broken and rebuilt yourself into something stronger than the person you were before. Isabella took a deep breath of cool mountain air and smiled. She'd started this journey believing she needed someone else to make her complete. A husband, a family, a title. But she'd ended it understanding the truth. She was already complete, always had been. She just had to lose everything to finally see it. And now, standing on the other side of the worst years of her life, she wasn't the woman who'd married into the Blackwood family hoping to belong. She was the woman who'd built her own empire from nothing, who'd survived exile and turned it into freedom, who'd taken every weapon they'd used against her and learned to forge something better. She was Isabella Hayes, not Blackwood, not Knight, just herself. And that was more than enough. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. Adrian's voice called out, "You coming back? They're asking for you." Isabella turned, her smile widening. "Yeah, I'm coming." She walked back toward the lights and the celebration and the future she'd earned, leaving the ghosts of who she used to be and who others wanted her to be behind in the growing darkness. And for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't looking back. She was moving forward, on her own terms, with her own power, building her own legacy. And no one, not Veronica, not Damien, not any empire built on fear and manipulation, could ever take that away from her again. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. The only person who could save her was herself. And she had, again and again and again, until she didn't need saving anymore, until she became the person others looked to when they needed saving. And that was the greatest victory of all, not revenge, not destruction, not even justice, just becoming fully, completely, unapologetically herself. And discovering that was the only thing she'd ever needed to be.